Okay, everyone, we're going to get started back again with our meeting. So if we could just get some order, some order in the chambers. Order in the chambers. We've got the bell, but I think everyone's pretty fine. It kind of sounds like a little Christmas fairy, eh? Start us off, Lawrence. Okie dokie. All right, just calling your attention. Okay, pop that back down now. Okay, so moving on to item 9.1, our first report of today, one of 4. We've got our Economic Development Strategy 2024 to 2027. Oh, we're missing Chris. That's quite an important... Oh, is Chris on her way? Oh, we can...
Oh, I can't speak for Chris.
I thought... Sorry.
I'm sure she won't be
I thought she was outside and you saw her. Too eager to get straight in. And... Oh, sweet. Ah, all good, all good. I've got the... She needs the certificate. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going on to our Economic Development Strategy 2024 to 27. We've got Gina, Darren and Chris. So we'll pass over to whoever's the appropriate person to begin the intro of the paper and then open up for questions.
Thank you. Kia ora. I will just say a little as an opening and then hand over to the team. So this is part of a series of conversations we've been having around economic development. So more recently, you agreed in principle to the new operating model, which includes the establishment of the trust and limited liability company. The economic development strategy is our topic for discussion today. The strategy is a really important feature because it sets direction and focus for the next 3 years. It's also going to be the basis of how we ensure that we're working with key stakeholders in our ecosystem, that we're focusing on the things that matter for business and industry in our community. And as you know, and the paper sets out, part of the new operating model is a fundamental step change where over the next 5 years we're forecasting a shift in how we are effectively funding economic development. So this sort of sits underneath that platform. You will recall that when we did our progress update on the Economic Development Strategy 2020 to 2023, that we brought in about 7 different businesses to talk to you about their experience and support that they'd received through the existing Economic Development Strategy. I'm not going to go back over that, but suffice to say, they all indicated satisfaction with support of the platform that is currently in place. So this strategy is looking to take the next steps with that and to set out how we're going to measure our progress, our focus areas across the period, and the actions that we're planning to take through that period. Just one small thing I'll say is we're not looking for feedback on the look and feel of what we've presented to you. We've got the core material. We've mentioned to you previously that as part of our cost-cutting exercise within council, we're going to be looking to utilise our webpage and internet space to actually showcase our strategies and other documents so that, yes, it will be nice and simple and easy to read and accessible, but won't be on paper, it won't be produced, it won't be sort of a glossy document that we're looking to hand out. So that's part of sort of shaving off some costs that we don't think is necessary. So I'm going to hand over to the team and they can lead you just through some key points and then we'll take questions. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, Chris. And I think I'll just start by reiterating that we had this strategy for 2020 to 2023, and you've already heard in a couple of briefings that aspects of that have been really successful. This is the second step in that process for developing our economic development system here in Kapiti. And I think it really builds on some of those successes, including the clusters approach that it's one of the things that we have heard previously has been really successful. I think it looks at developing that further. It mentions the structure of the EDKB changing and really strengthening some of that independence and attraction of funds that can come from that process. It does note ongoing work in education and training in this district, some more focus on supporting existing businesses and a little bit of stepping up on supporting Te Ao Māori perspectives and economic development in that space as well. What we're looking for today is approval for doing a little bit more work led by the EDKB on engaging with stakeholders on what this looks like now, and to bring this back in March for final approval. We are developing a website behind that. You will see the document itself has a short strategy front piece with some appendices in there, which will be part of the website as well. So really happy to take questions and comments. Darren, is there anything you'd like to add to that? No? So happy to take the paper as read from there and
Awesome.
take questions.
Great, thank you, Gina. Thanks, Chris, and Darren as well. And Mark, I see he's at the back of the room. Over to Councillor Coe for a question.
Look, thank you very much. I've obviously been heavily involved in the development of this paper. There's a few tweaks that we're working on through the EDKB, so this is certainly by no means a final version. But I do have a question following on from the presentation by the Chamber, and probably Chris might be the best person to answer this. So given that we are moving the EDKB and the strategy and so on into like a more of an arm's length relationship, what is the relationship between EDKB, the Economic Development Department, and the regulatory side of things? Is there, is the role of economic development, as our speakers alluded to be the conduit between developers, builders, and so on, and the regulatory team, or is it even the role of EDKB and economic development to monitor the performance of the regulatory side of the business and raise issues and try and seek some improvement in the way things happen in regulatory? Thank you.
Thank you. I will say the focus of the paper today is obviously on economic development and what it is we are seeking to focus on over the next 3 to 5 years. What I will call your attention to is in section 3 of the strategy itself, there are some measures around how we'll know we're making a difference. One of the areas, the third, is the creating an inclusive community that is recognised as a great and easy place to invest and do business. The measures that are in there around how we'll know we're going well is a survey of a business about whether they're feeling supported by the EDKB and Council in terms of their business. The second one is that business who are surveyed, whether they have a good awareness of council requirements for business and agree that it's easy to do business in Kapiti. So the reason I'm raising that is I think in an economic development context, the EDKB and the ecosystem is a really great way to get feedback from business around how things are going, and we will be looking to understand that from business. I think separately to this conversation, we do have work underway around regulatory and other briefings. We can dig into that a bit more. But essentially, I think there is a connection between understanding how things are going and looking at how we're operating and where there's opportunity to make improvement. And I think that is the connection.
Councillor Warwick.
My question is kind of a little bit the same, but we had someone talk to us today from the construction industry, which is not kind of really mentioned, but is a big thing in our community because we've got so much building projected. How are we going to accommodate and include? And they're a hard bunch to corral, but how do we get there?
So in terms of cluster activity, to date, it's been industry-led that has been working in terms of sort of cluster around the construction space. In terms of supporting the sector, a big factor that we've come up with, or that's been raised with us, is skills and ongoing, employment opportunities. And so one of the initiatives that's been working on in the ED space is the Skills Hub with Mills Albert to help provide pathways for those sorts of activities. So we definitely do engage with the sector. We definitely do targeted sort of activities with them in terms of a cluster that's been more industry-led to date than council-led.
Apologies for that. Bede Larissy.
Thank you. Just before my question, just want to clarify from Councillor Coe, asked a question based on feedback from Chamber. Just want to clarify, was that in reference to Monique Leith speaking this morning? Or was that other feedback?
It was, well, I believe she was speaking on behalf of the Chamber.
She never identified herself as speaking for Chamber. She was speaking as an industry expert. So I just wanted to clarify that was...
Okay, my apologies.
Yep. So just to clarify, that was...
I made an assumption.
Yeah,
so just to
thanks for
clarify,
clarifying
that
that.
was industry expert comment.
Thank you.
Okay, so question just on page 60 of the agenda, there's a pie chart at the bottom which shows quite strong support for the focus areas of the strategy. I note there that the big, we'll probably dispute what exact colour that is, but the big one there, it says agree or conditionally agree. Can we get a breakdown between agree and conditionally agree? Because I think there's a massive difference. It's not a small difference. It's the difference between acceptance and counter-offer. It would be useful to know how many people just said yes and how many people said yes, but. Is it possible to know that?
We can. We'll have to come back to you. I don't
sure.
have that information
no.
to hand, but definitely do that.
Cool, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, question for me is about where the checks and balances are. So, for instance, if the new company or whatever the structure is going to be, once that gets set up, and then what happens is half the public speakers who came in this morning who have a real problem with council over whether it's a regulatory environment, but how that impacts how they see it anyway, how that impacts on business, etc. And so they would presumably want this organisation to go into bat for them collectively against the council that's going to be giving them $8 million over the next 3 years. And so is part of the conditions of this new group that they aren't a, I'm not going to say a political, quasi-political, they aren't a pressure group, they have how limited are they? So would Neil be able to write in here and go, we're representing industry and we hate you people, and can you give us a check on the way out? How's that going to work?
I think if I respond to that question in regards to the economic development strategy that's on the table today, the economic development strategy is intended to be available and, if you like, the common platform or starting point for the ecosystem working together. So I think you've previously heard Neil is our current chair of the EDKB noting that the EDKB is not going to do this all by themselves. There's important stakeholders in that ecosystem, such as the Chamber, such as our Māori Business Network, a variety of people who are involved who, I'll say it this way, make the magic happen to support our businesses. So what this is trying to do is set out a platform to say, here's what we're expecting to happen. Alongside this will be our annual letter of expectation, which will be more of the nuts and bolts around accountability. What you can expect, though, is you'll have regular engagements with the key stakeholders of the ecosystem around how is delivery against this strategy going. And any issues that would be coming through, we'd expect those to be worked through in the ecosystem. They can be raised. There'd be discussions around those. We'd be looking to ensure that we resolve those as we do right now. So I think if you imagined next year and the year after to what currently happens, you could expect to see the same level of opportunity and engagement from council around our direction. But this is an important document, though, to say, here's the starting point for our conversations together and what we're trying to achieve. So that's how this fits into that puzzle.
Yeah, and just for me, I just, because I couldn't explicitly see, I couldn't picture where the advocacy role fits, and if there is going to be an advocacy role, and I get that there'll be other slices of the pie, and we'll get that piece of the pie to go be the advocate, but if you want business buy-in, because ultimately businesses have to buy into this, because if they don't, then it'll perish like most of these things do.
Yeah.
So that advocacy, I mean, will there be at any stage an explicit clause around advocacy? How will they be constrained in any way?
Not on the economic development strategy.
Right.
I think what we'll do is we'll take a note of that question for an upcoming discussion on some of the other steps in this process. What I will say, though, is I think a really good example of advocacy in motion was standing up the Otaki Business Association. So the EDKB supported standing that up. They're now 70 plus strong and going hard and going well and really engaged with the EDKB. So they're seeing that as a really effective and useful engagement point. And they have the rest of the ecosystem to lean into to, as they see fit, work forward. So the model is based on, it's very much voluntary. If it works, business will want to be engaged. If it doesn't add value, you're not forced to. And I think the idea will be, as we check in, if we're not seeing the changes that we'd like to see set through this economic development strategy, we need to make sure that we're holding this system and the key players that are funded to account to actually make stuff happen. So that's what this document gives us the basis for.
I would just say I'm not using advocacy in a solely negative sense. There is a lot of positive advocacy that can happen as well. It's just about whose role and where that fits. But that's cool. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Kirby.
Thank you. Just I've got two questions. The first one, in the recommendations, it says one of them is to the third one, I think it is, for us to endorse the content of the draft strategy. Can I just have clarity, us endorsing it, does that mean that this then becomes no longer a draft but becomes our strategy?
No. No, I can confirm that you'll approve it in March. It endorses the substantive content so that we can start to shape up to bring you the final strategy. So it's almost saying, yes, we're heading in the right direction if I frame it that way.
So we're really endorsing in principle what it
Yeah.
Okay. So then the implication of that is there is room between now and March for further feedback from business, from us, from other areas to be able to fill it to enhance what we're providing as this draft.
Correct. And you'll note in recommendation D, D1, it specifically sets out that the EDKB is going to engage stakeholders between now, January, and maybe February, depending on people's availability, so that we can, as we are finalising it, ensure that it has had those, I'll say those little zhuzhing points to ensure we land it in the right space.
Great. And I'm assuming, again, this is just for my own clarity, I'm assuming those key stakeholders are the ones that are listed in the strategy itself in section 4, where it's who's driving shifts in economic development in our district. There's a diagram that outlines a whole bunch of different organisations and entities. Are those our key stakeholders, or are we talking, I'm just wanting some clarity around who do we define as key stakeholders?
That circle does list key stakeholders. We also have our cluster groups that we're engaging, and more broadly, the EDKB has been pushing out into parts of the community to test the ideas and focus. So we can bring that back when we come back in March and say, here's the comprehensive list of who's been engaged, because that might be the question you're asking.
Yes, that would be good to know who has been.
Yeah.
The other thing for me is how are we going to make it clear for, we heard two speakers this morning talking about the sense that the construction industry, that kind of thing, they don't feel like it's represented in here in terms of having a voice. How does anyone who doesn't see themselves in this draft or as a key stakeholder, how do they connect with us to provide feedback around this strategy?
I think the strategy will, it's already been out in draft. I will note that the community as a whole had an opportunity to provide feedback and comment on the strategy as part of Vision Kapiti and our hub and engagement. It was online. It's had a wide range of comments and feedback to get it to where it is today. We've talked about key stakeholders and targeted specific engagement because we thought those groups had more skin in the game in terms of the focus for the strategy. Darren, do you want to add anything more to that?
I was just going to say, in terms of that circle diagram that talks about the ecosystem, there is people outside that ecosystem we talk to. So we, in terms of the engagement to date and discussion to date, we've talked to the Older Persons Council, the Youth Council, our Disability Advisory Group, and those sorts of things as well. So there is quite a comprehensive makeup of stakeholders that we will re-engage with through this process.
Great. I guess just my point here is we don't know who we're missing until we, and so how do we make it easy if there's, because what I'm hearing through here is a lot of what we're trying to present through this strategy is driven by our business community. I mean, you made a comment before that clusters are more industry-led than council-led. How does industry, whatever that looks like, business, connect into this if we haven't identified them? Where's the pathway? How do we make that known that they have an opportunity? Because I think that's an ongoing challenge for us, how we continue to have the door open for more people to feed into or to have influence on.
I'm just going to note that we'll circulate to you who we're planning to engage with or who the EDKB is planning to engage with, so that if you think there's any gaps, you can let us know that. I think we'll give this feedback to the EDKB because the other thing we can do is obviously put a media statement out to say, hey, obviously we're endorsing this today, and that there's an opportunity for people to get involved, to have a look at it if they want to see or have or influence that final zone. So we can definitely take those steps.
All right.
I've got one more question.
Okay, last question.
Okay, thank you. The other bit was you just made a comment about this draft being out through the Vision Kapiti stuff. I think it was our direction of travel that was out there rather than the draft strategy, in my understanding. And I think that's quite different. In terms of consultation, we consulted on the direction of travel, not the draft strategy. They're two different things. And I think you need to be clear that we have not consulted on this.
Okay, I'm going to, I'll take that on board and say, as part of our process, the direction of travel is essentially the core information that has gone into the draft strategy. So we focus on substantive content deliberately so that we can go, have we got the right bits of sort of jigsaw in place. Are there any holes? Is there anything missing? And I think the reason we're slowly taking those steps is to your point. We want to make sure we're hearing from people. We want to make sure there's space to add to. And so all we've done with the direction of travel content is shifted it into the strategy, zhushed it slightly, I'll say, so that it's in the shape of a strategy. And then we want to test that just in case we've dropped something or something has been changed and it really makes a difference to people. So that's what we're testing. So we'll make sure that we're clear about that and the portals that people can come through to engage. And I will note, we'll pass on to Neil and the team the comments made today by a member of the construction industry that they're looking to engage. I know previously Neil's indicated they're very open to any industry coming to speak to them.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for indulging me, Madam Chair.
No worries, but we will have to be aware of time. Team, we've only got roughly another hour allocated for this meeting, so let's see what we can get done in that amount of time. Richard Mansell.
I can be very quick. Page 11 of the document, paragraph 33, there's this really exciting statement. The rates collected from business will reduce. I just wondered, and I'm excited by that, whether it's going to be reducing in accordance to the graph or the table that's above it by 10% in year 25-26 down to 40% in 29-30, because I could take a substantial drop in rates at the moment, but I've never ever known council to reduce a rate. Is that a commitment? But you're going to reduce the rates, the commercial rate? No. Yeah, so you'll take it from commercial rates to promote business to do something else.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Richard, for the question. We'll pass to Chris.
So I think as we previously mentioned to you, this table, the way that the new model works is that we will be continuing to charge our existing rate. That itself doesn't reduce. What is going to have a net reduction is that over time, the trust is going to give a dividend back. And so that dividend will come off the rate that's charged. The rate itself is not proposed to reduce. So it's the net reduction that we're referencing.
So the money coming back disappears into a slush fund, or
no, it's that the rate.
it's
the
spent
rate
somewhere else.
No, the rate.
So
will
the rates
stay,
won't reduce. The business rate won't reduce. So what you've said in the paper is incorrect.
It's the net. It's the net reduction. So
Yeah, maybe the words need to be
Yeah.
adjusted to better reflect the intention behind making that statement.
Yeah.
Is I think what Chris has heard, and we can take that offline.
we'll take that offline
Yeah.
to clarify that point. But
Okay.
essentially, the business rate will stay as it is,
Yeah.
and the dividend that comes back will be apportioned to business. That's what it's attempting to say.
Is there any plan to try and charge businesses the rate rather than the commercial property the rate? Because so many businesses have transacted from residential properties.
I'm wondering if this is a conversation we can take offline. Is that okay, Richard? Yeah, thank you, because we're getting into.
This is definitely not a question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take that offline. We'll go to Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of looking at this paper and I suppose economic development, I'm sort of taking a holistic view here. And so, and I'm sort of following up on some of the comments that Deputy Mayor Kirby made in terms of this is very business and industry focused. To me, there are a lot of other activities out there that are not necessarily included in that, and I think there are some big gaps. And I suppose one of the ones, for example, and I know this, you know, is being quite specific, is paragraph 30 on page 10. It talks about how the strategy has no impacts on climate and environment, yet it talks about sustainable or regenerative agriculture. So the 2 points there. So and I know this has been brought up before, is that our CWB has got great potential in terms of being really strong in terms of our tourism. There's nothing mentioned in there, and I suppose that there is about KCDC being proactive in terms of developing those trails, and that's not necessarily through a business network or or an industry. So that part of it is actually missing. And then also when you actually look at that diagram on page 22, there's nothing in there about sustainable agriculture or the environment. So that's all missing in there. So
So that's, should we just put a question mark on the end of that?
yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So why is that the case? Because I had a similar question, especially regarding the climate
Yes.
environment considerations being null.
So my other thought too is in this document it talks about how we measure success. Do you think that increasing the number of events is actually going to be a good way of measuring success rather than the number of more people are coming along and actually spending money here?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Ivanov. There's two questions in there, it seems.
It's about, I suppose, specifically about how we measure success and are they appropriate?
Yeah, the first one around the absence of trails and I guess broader environmental initiatives as being a way that potentially tourism could be generated, and the second one being around events being a suitable measure.
That's an example of the way we measure success.
Look, in terms of trails, we actually had a discussion about how we can support some work in terms of leveraging and the trails for economic development yesterday in the EDKB board meeting. And there's a piece of work that they are wanting to support with the Tourism Advisory Board to progress that. And that would be a piece of work that would happen with the Trails Trust as well, sort of thing. So there definitely is a recognition in terms of, you know, the opportunity, the chance to bring ecotourism and those sorts of things into the district. I think the problem with the strategy is we can't go into everything that is going on. It's kept at a high level to make sure that you know there is an ability to be flexible at times. In terms of the cluster work, there is a sustainable business group that is supported through the economic development, and there's a process of trying to enhance that even further, sort of thing. The other thing is, I suppose, that this strategy doesn't live in isolation from the other strategy work that we're doing. So the strategy team is obviously working on other pieces of strategy, and it's really important that they are interconnected pieces of work as well. So, in terms of the detail, there might not be the detail you're looking for, but that doesn't mean that it's not part of the approach and the plan, and that this strategy doesn't live by itself as a separate strategy from the other pieces of strategy that we have.
And I don't know that we're going to solve or resolve that slight mismatch today in the meeting, so I'm wondering if that could be taken away, and maybe a conversation with even Jocelyn and myself as the chair and deputy chair of climate and environment could potentially occur.
Yep, happy to do that.
Thank you.
I might just add that the comments Darren's made relate to Focus Area 3 under the Thriving Visitor Economy, and there's two options there in the work program, option 18 and 19, that work regarding the CWB itself and those trails and tracks sit in. So that's underneath that. It would be something that, as it develops, we'd report back on. So just showing how it connects back in to the documents you have.
Yeah, so I think just having one sentence in there would actually just flags, it gets people's minds thinking about things rather than not being present.
Yeah.
And then I suppose the other part too is some measures of success. Are they appropriate?
I might kick off while Darren's just checking that to say the measures of success that are proposed in here were developed by the EDKB. They, I think, presented to you their thinking earlier in the piece. Humare, the chief economist at Burl, had looked through equivalent and comparable measures for economic development, and that is what's reflected in here. things that you could report at a local level that would help you understand the impact that you're having to support and boost the local economy.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Pravanov, for your questions. Councillor Coфord.
Thank you, Chair Sophie. I'm an old person, if you haven't realised, and I've been in the building industry for, 45 years on the coast here. I've seen cycles come and go, recessions come and go. And this morning you heard from people in the building industry who are really frustrated. And you heard during the week that liquidations, insolvencies have gone up 27% more than previous years. So what I'm saying is that the building industry and other industries are struggling on the coast here, and they need all of the encouragement and help they can get. And I think council can help. On a positive note, I've seen the tiny houses initiative, school kids putting houses together and using them. That's great. We're looking at a possible urban panel that can sit down with the developers and raise issues that could come up. That might be a possibility next year. We're looking at the Trails Trust that's just been formed, so that can integrate with the other initiatives. But my question is, how can we help in an immediate sense? How can we help these guys out there that are struggling? I know we've got Mills and Albert's initiative with the clusters and that. Where can a person go and seek help immediately instead of talking about it and getting strategies in place? And the people that are quiet are the ones of concern, the quiet ones that have set up by themselves, and they can see they hear about these other things, having these initiatives going on. How do we reach out to them?
Okay, thank you, Rob. I
Okay,
think
thank you.
that question's been put, so yeah. Is there
Only to say,
brief
other than what
answer?
we've already said, local government is obviously part of a wider system. Central government is offering support to business. So, Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment does have support for people or businesses or industries that are struggling in the current environment. At a local level, we're trying to put things in place to support targeted collective areas of I would say, challenge and or opportunity where we can. And I think the reality is we are not going to be able to solve the magnitude of that problem, which is not just in Kapiti, it's happening nationally. And so the other thing that local government can do, though, is advocate to central government to ensure that business is supported.
So this economic development strategy can't help in the immediate future?
I think it's not going to solve every issue that industry or business have in our community. It is trying to target some areas of challenge or opportunity where we believe we could get the most bang for buck to help lift the economy and create more opportunity for industry and business in our district.
Thank you, Councillor Coфord. The last... Oh, yeah, sorry, Darren. Yeah.
I suppose in terms of right now, so the ED team is actively talking to businesses all the time. And so definitely is very aware that things are tough right now. Definitely adapting what we can do to make sure that we can support business as much as possible. And that's a range of business. It's definitely the construction and building sector is hard, but hospitality, all sorts of retail, it's a real struggle right now. And a real big focus is trying to make sure that we can do small things to help and be adaptable to that.
Great, thank you. I'm aware Councillor Coe, she's just indicated she would like to move the recommendations. Are there a couple of questions that... Yep, Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. If I could just refer to page 17 of the agenda under where to next for Kapiti. And I just wanted to reference point 3. It's sort of in relation to the conversation this morning around regulatory, and that's not a new conversation at all. And number 3 talks to so we're talking about 3 focus areas for change. And number 3 really does allude to inclusive business community where everyone can have tools for success while making it easier to do and start up business. And that then slips over to supported by 3 measurable shifts. My concern around this is it says more attractive sustainable economic development where businesses understand and navigate council processes, attracting more business to the area. My issue is that it's very hard to navigate and understand a process when we can agree that the process has issue that needs to be addressed, rather than trying to sell something to people that we know is not working. So I just wanted to flag maybe there's something that needs to go in there that just refers that there is an issue there that is going to be addressed through this process. As such, that was it.
Yep, Darren and Gina are furiously writing that down, so I think that's
all, and I appreciate that will
That's
come
been
in
heard.
as we lead into the landing of the document next year.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Halliday. We'll go to Councillor Coe, who I think, or do you have one quick question, Shelley?
There's a quick question that can be answered later.
Cool, okay, perfect. So moved by Councillor Coe, seconded,
I'm moving A to F, yeah.
moving all the recommendations, cool. Seconded Councillor Halliday, right of introduction, Councillor Coe.
Right, thank you. Look, I just want to point out, this is very much a work in progress. And, you know, the whole idea about, you know, what we're doing in the economic development space is that this is by industry for industry. The key to making this a success is to have wide consultation within the business community and incorporate the feedback that we get from them. It's more about them than it is about, you know, the people around this table. So that's the direction we're moving with economic development, is to allow the business community to dictate the direction and the priorities for what we do in the economic development space. I just want to point out also that economic development, despite this figure of 8 million that's being bandied about, has very limited free resources to do things in economic development. There has to be priorities given. We can't encompass everybody and everything in what we do in the economic development space, or we would need 10 times the budget that we currently have. So I think the point of this document is we're trying to identify where those priority areas are, and in particular fostering development of new and emerging industries such as the tech cluster, the food and beverage sector, you know, trying to bring them together, trying to bring together businesses and OTAC here, you know, supporting them through the business association there. It's about creating new things and, you know, working with those green shoots, if you like, within our economy. Yes, there are issues with long-established businesses such as the construction industry, and we can support those, especially, you know, I think there is a role certainly in terms of that regulatory side of things to be raising concerns with council where we see that is impacting on our particularly our construction industry. So I think, you know, as I say, it's a work in progress. Let's encourage the EDKB to go out to a wide range of stakeholders. Let's try and get feedback from the community at large on this document so that we have a really strong strategy going forward that has a general agreement across particularly the business community. And then I think we'll be setting ourselves up for success. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Coe. If I could just also encourage people to be aware of time, and if they have something that they want to contribute to debate but it's already been said, if you could just kind of forego. Yeah, perfect. If it's already been said and you can just like snap your fingers for someone else, that would be really helpful just to keep us moving along. Okay, Councillor Warwick.
Mine was a question, and it can come back to us. I'd just like to understand, if we're giving away 90% of the our funds, how are we going to support ED within the council as in staff? And that can come back because we're not going to have that money. It's going to be in a different entity.
Okay, yep, let's bring that back. Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just completely endorse the comments by Councillor Coe. But I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Councillor Kirby talked to the door being open. How do groups engage and don't engage, and who do we engage with? And there's a little bit of a chicken and egg process of that one there, but I like to think we're heading in the right direction, and it was a good thing to bring up. Councillor Wilson's talked around advocacy, and my expectation is that there are issues that need to be championed. Yes, why not? But constructively with regards to the EDBK coming in, because they should be a voice for business as well, but not taking anything away also from organisations like the Chamber, etc. But they will have potentially different pathways as well, due to the relationships that they will have and access that they'll also have through governance and operation, I would have thought too. And if they're smart, they'll utilise those pressure points. And also just addressing the exasperation talked to in the regulatory space this morning. Yeah, it's not a quick fix, but the fix doesn't sit in this document, and the fix sits somewhere else with regards to things. But it's very fair to link it to an issue that we need to address in our district if we're going to be open for business, and that's been an ongoing sore point for quite a while. And I think this morning really brought that to a head with regards to something that does need to be addressed. So I do hope there is support for this as we move forward. It is a change of pace with regards to things, but it will deliver, which hasn't been happening in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, we're all close enough in this room. We can almost finish each other's sentences. So I just want to finish one of Comrade Coe's sentences that said, "This is by industry for industry." The end of that sentence is paid for by the public. And as the person who bandied about the 8 million, the 8 million actually isn't a bandied about number, it's a factual number, and it's been confirmed by staff that that's a real number. So we heard about dividend, and I know in the earlier discussions there was the Tauranga example of Priority 1 was lauded as just a brilliant example of what we should follow. Should be noted that in the 21 years of the existence of Priority 1, they have never returned a dividend back to Tauranga Council, and in fact they continue to get funding after 21 years. The council is still their most significant funder. So the idea that somehow these things are going to magically morph into that there will be a flow of resource back to council, there just isn't a living example, and the very best example that we were given showed after 21 years they still don't do it. I'm not saying the work they don't do is great work, but I'm just saying who's paying for it, so we need to know that. Personally, I have a great deal of faith in Mark Ward and Darren and Gina and all of the people who are here, and if you look at most of the really exciting initiatives that have happened in the last few years, that's how they've happened. The relationships with the public and with business have been fantastic. And so, anyway. The other thing I would make a note of is that Deloitte's did a study, and there's been others, that show about 1/3 of our economy comes from the voluntary sector. It's a massive, massive player in the economy. And so I'm not quite sure what the strategy is for dealing with that. But again, the voluntary sector, it's a huge part of our economy. It's a quiet part, and people don't realise it, but it's massive. So how that might fit into it. But yeah, let's all be optimistic that this, now that it's been decided that this thing's going to work, yeah, we'll see.
Thank you. Bede Laracy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to talk about the structure today, but as somebody who is in the business world, so is one of the people who makes up the industry/business group that this should be buy-in for, I can't help myself. There's a saying, man wasn't made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man. And that's been coming to me a lot as I'm going through this, and I think my issue is here. I've made some questions quite early on in this piece in terms of whether clusters should be such a strong focus. Now, when Chamber made that through the direction of travel engagement, the word was Chamber doesn't like clusters, and I think that's a bit objective. Chamber didn't disagree with clusters. Chamber and I think there's just more to business than clusters. So what we do when we set up clusters, it's great. I mean, we can gather businesses together, we can resources them, we can do all sorts of things. But if we're not careful, what we do is we set up a structure that businesses have to squeeze themselves into, rather than setting up a system that enables businesses. And that's the difference. I feel like we're making man for the Sabbath here, okay? I keep hearing in this conversation, this is by for business, and it's not. I've sat in multiple rooms of key stakeholders across this whole conversation. I've yet to hear one of those rooms applaud the level of engagement. So while I hear people come to this table and say, yes, we engaged with key stakeholders, have we ever stopped and asked those key stakeholders if they feel engaged? I'm not sure that we have. I'm not entirely sure that we've got a defined purpose for all of this. And I think that that creates a lot of cross purposes along the way. So when the initial ED structure was set up last time, lots of people had expectations coming out of it. And I think there's been a lot of conflict over the last few years because of that. We saw a really good example this morning. Now, we can say that regulatory stays with regulatory and doesn't move with ED. But when ED was set up, we were told, the businesses, we were told that one of the roles of the ED team was to sit across all departments of council to help businesses. That's what we were told, including you, Councillor Coe, because I've been in rooms where we've discussed it. That was the expectation. When the Bond Store had that issue, I've heard councillors even refer to that. So now I'm not saying that the ED team has somehow not met its mark, because that isn't my point. My point is the difference in expectations has led to the differences. So I think what we need to do, we need to be clear about what the purpose of this is so that we're not getting into those difficulties. I'm not a big believer in government being in business anyway, because business can do business, but we've agreed to go down this path and that's fine. The EDKB have helped stand up the Otaki Business Association. It's great. Otaki needs that business association and that support. My question is, in what way have they enabled and supported other business associations? Because I know of one that's, in real terms, it's actually fallen apart completely, but there may be help for it. We'll see. And another one is desperately struggling for survival. In terms of dollar figures, because that was asked this morning, so under this strategy, so I'm just sticking within this draft strategy, under this strategy, including the 2004-25 financial year, $9 million is projected to be funneled into this private entity from council. Now I'm going to repeat, that's public money. We can frame it as business targeted rate as though that doesn't matter, but that is based on the graph. I can see the confusion, so I'll be clear. Based on the graph on page 11, where you've got the sliding scale of input, goes from 90 to 85 to 75, 60 to 40. On Thursday, we had it confirmed that the starting point for that is $2 million. So going on those percentage scales, that adds up to $9 million across the years projected in the strategy. That's assuming everything goes swimmingly well. But in year 3 and 4, if it's still struggling to get its feet and isn't getting a lot of funding, is council likely to limit the funding or withdraw it anyway? Probably not. So it could very well end up costing a lot more. If my maths is wrong, I'm happy for somebody to correct me. So that's a lot of public money. And I've reinforced that term, public money. This is public money. If business wanted to do it itself, it could. All we'd need to do is stop taking that business rate, and business could take that money, chuck it in a pot, go ahead with the structure, and then engage with council as a partner. Could do it. Totally within its own power. And in fact, I've challenged business leaders to do exactly that, instead of coming to council and expecting it to do this way. So that is another viable alternative. I started my time as an elected member being really supportive of this because, yeah, council isn't necessarily the best at deciding what's best for business, but council also isn't best at deciding what's best for roading infrastructure or finance structures or various other things that council do. We're a democracy, and this is kind of how democracies function. Is it the best way to do it? Maybe not. But the more conversations I'm involved in, the less comfortable I am with this whole structure. I don't get to have a vote on this, so I don't need to vote. But I seem to be getting an increasing number of concerns as we go along this. So I've raised some of them today, and people can take from them what they like. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete. Councillor Pravanov.
Yes, just very quickly. So obviously there's been a lot of conversation today about, I suppose, the content of the strategy. My thought is in D1 and 2, particularly D1, that there is actually not enough time to engage with the stakeholders in December and January. Is that being pushed out, or is that what you're actually going to work to, particularly over the Christmas period?
The statement about EDKB, to close the loop, was with the key stakeholder groups that we said we were targeting. That's happening in December and January. So the EDKB effectively endorsed that at their board meeting, subject to some zhuzhing. But the idea is that there will be engagement to test and focus that through clusters and those key stakeholder groups.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Mayor
Yeah,
Holbrook.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I just want to keep us focused on what we're here to do today. We're here to endorse this economic development strategy so that the Kotahitanga board and our economic development team can get on with the work that they have established through the stakeholder groups that they think is low-hanging fruit that will improve the economy in our area. The structures around that, the details around that, they're actually the subject of a separate report, though they are referenced in here, so they're not irrelevant. I've seen quite a few economic development strategies come across this table in my time as council. And I think, though it's questionable whether it should be in a recommendation, I agree with the words. It sets a simple, focused direction for collective action to improve economic development opportunity in Kapiti. And it sets out a program of work that it's established, that has been established to drive that. It's not trying to be all things to all people. It's not trying to sort out our regulatory problems in council. It's not necessarily covering every sector, though I hope that the construction industry can be brought in. It sets out what it intends to do quite clearly, and I think they're really positive pieces of work. So let's get in behind it and support it. I think actually the economic development area is going well in council. Now is not the time to discuss whether we spend too much on it, whether we should be doing it or not. That actually happens through the long-term plan process. We've committed that we're going to do this through that process, and this is the tool that we're going to use to do it. So I'd encourage everybody to support this today.
All right, thank you, Mayor Holbrook. Right of reply.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jan. I was about to make the same point. This is not an annual plan or an LTP discussion. So, yeah, it is economic development, just to make the point, is funded largely through a targeted commercial rate. It is but there are benefits to our wider community, because you'll see a lot of the focus of what we're doing here is around skills and employment, and that has benefits across the board, not just to businesses. So, but look, I think we do need to just get on and do it. There is provision in there for a wider scope. We are looking in the strategy very much at the business ecosystem as part of what the work that is done through the economic development strategy. That is a kind of a catch-all where we're looking at how we can support the whole business ecosystem environment, whether that's through creating new opportunities or supporting business associations, providing mentoring, training, etc., etc. So I do believe there is, while we've got some areas of focus with the clusters and so on, there is a catch-all there that pretty much covers, or should potentially cover, every business in Kapiti who will benefit from this strategy. So let's just get on and do some good things. Let's review where things are at early next year after it's been out for consultation. We'll have another chance to review it at that point.
All right, thank you, Councillor Coe. We'll just pass over to the CE who I think wants to say something. And Councillor Wilson, if you could pop your mic off, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, we'll pass to Darren and then we'll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a query about Community Board Larracy's comments. I don't normally do this, right? But I need a clarification.
Okay.
Were you criticising staff on the advice that they give, and that we're not good at finance and we're not good at doing roading? Was that what I heard, or did I mishear you?
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely not. No. I'm talking about, in terms of democratic structures, one of the drivers of this conversation has been business should take care of ED because councillors are, actually there was some pretty strong language used about councillors and their incompetence, I believe was one word used at the time, and that they shouldn't therefore be in charge of ED. So my point is simply, well, if you applied the same reasoning, council would also be out of infrastructure and roading, out of finance, out of the other areas of council as well, because we're not experts in those either. So no, absolutely not. Yeah, no, probably the opposite, really, if anything. If indeed councillors are incompetent and useless, we're incompetent and useless in every area of council, not just economic development.
Yeah. Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
But thank you for clarifying that, because I would have hated if staff walked out of the room thinking that's what I said about them. So thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Darren. Was there an amendment? I haven't been made aware of this prior to now.
No, just a very quick comment. A through F are all noting except one that says endorse. I think that should be noting. I don't want to vote against it. So if people were happy that be endorsed, a note, because that did get raised in debate. But either which way, I'm cool. But I prefer not to vote against it, because you're asking us to endorse. You're asking us to endorse something that's uncertain, and we've heard enough discussion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. We should check if the mover and seconder would be comfortable with that. If not, we'll carry on. No? Okay, so we're carrying on with the recommendations.
Can I take them
A
separately?
through F.
Can I take them separately, please?
Okay, we will take them separately. Could we take the endorse one separately and all the noting ones together? Are people comfortable with that? Okay. So, 1 second. Okay, so we've got A and B, moved and seconded, Councillor Coe, Councillor Halliday. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Recommendation C, which is endorse the contents. Oh, yeah. Sounds good. Yep. All right, so D, E and F. So again, 3 more noting recommendations. Moved and seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Those are carried. Now we come back to recommendation C, which is endorsing the contents of the refreshed ED strategy. Moved and seconded as well. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Division? Yep. Okay, so all those... Oh, we'll just wait for the bit of paper. All right, all those in favour, if you could raise your hand.
Okay, I've got Councillor Henford. I have who worship the Mayor. I have Councillor Spires. I have Councillor Coe, Councillor Warwick, Councillor Halliday, and Councillor Kirby, Deputy Mayor.
And all those against, please raise your hand.
I have Councillor Wilson, Councillor Cooper, and Councillor Privanov. Oh, and Councillor Coford, sorry.
Great,
Point
thank
of
you.
order.
That's been recorded. Yeah.
We don't have a vote recorded for Ms. Tahiwi, and she is a member of this committee.
Oh.
Thank you.
And come to Iwi.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Kirby. Busy beavering away, doing some mahi in the corner.
So that's 8-4.
All right, so that's 8-4 and 4 against, so that has passed. Oh, but he didn't vote. Okay, All right, so that's 8 for, 4 against, so that has been passed. You made that comment. You made that comment in debate. We have to keep moving. Thank you so much, Gina, Darren, Mark, Chris. Appreciate that. All right, we're moving on to Affordable Housing Trust, steps to settle the trust. Now, it feels like we've had many conversations about the Affordable Housing Trust, and at most of the steps along the process, there's
Happy to
been
move.
unanimous support around the table. This is very much now just literally formalising the establishment, which is really exciting, and the trustees have all come together, and happy Larry. So, yeah, Chris and the team introduce the paper, and then hopefully we can move this one through quite quickly.
Kia ora. I guess just to confirm, this is a noting paper. It's to close the loop on a previous decision you've made. We're taking the paper as read and open to questions if any.
Awesome. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Did you want to move the
Yeah.
paper by any chance? Great. I seconded.
Sorry.
That's okay. We'll just get it seconded, and then we'll come to your question. Seconded, Deputy Mayor Kirby. Right of introduction. Sorry, and then Councillor Halliday, your question. Yeah.
You want to do question?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Cool. You'll just pop your mic off, Councillor.
I guess it's a general question, but it is page 69 of the, and in regards to the change around removing the requirement for a chip status. Now, I do note that this was talked to when we did discuss this in October, but I'm sort of just, again, I just want to be reminded, why are we removing that requirement?
It was to make sure that the trust had flexibility in terms of their model going forward. There's definitely benefits, but there's also implications of being a chip.
Yep.
And it may be beneficial if they weren't a chip in some circumstances. And that just gives them the flexibility to do that. Before, they didn't have that flexibility.
Appreciating the flexibility, the kaupapa behind this is low cost, being a fundamental part of this. Regards to, it says it's not a critical requirement. I'm of the mind that potentially is a critical requirement, because what then keeps the trust and the focus of the offering of affordable. And I refer back to the Queenstown model that this is all based on with regards to that. And I appreciate that chip status enables you to get certain funding from central government with regards to supporting affordable housing as such. I guess, I know we've got our related documents, relationship documents and the other documents as well in relation to this. Just a little bit concerned that if the trust, for want of a way of saying, goes off reservation with regards to the directions that they're going. Appreciating we're going to be talking about Rangiru, appreciating we're going to be talking about older persons housing in the preliminary steps as such. But an underlying focus is supplying affordable housing or affordable housing options for our community. As such, and to me, it's I'm a little bit. I'm struggling to get my head around the fact that if that is optional, then what will be the mechanisms used to create that affordability situation as such, or to give security of tenure and that sort of stuff, and to bring that cost right down without that support?
Yeah. So it's in terms of what you can talk about.
I think that the purpose of the trust, the wider trust deed,
Yeah.
really does focus the trust on provision of affordable community housing and so forth, the list of activities.
So that'll be part of us massaging this as we move along.
Yeah.
To the scenario. Yep, okay,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to bring it up. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is a similar conversation we had at that meeting as well, but I just wanted to bring it out here a little bit as well.
And I think we've already been talking with you about an example of a project where there is funding. Chip status has no benefit in terms of that funding. So
Yes, I
actually, a
appreciate
chip
that.
you can't actually be a chip.
Oh, you can't be a chip to get
Well,
that funding?
You can't, in terms of that funding, the chip rules don't apply.
Oh, you can't, okay. All right, no, that's cool. I just, again, hopefully I'll be here keeping an eye on that as we move forward as well, in that sort of scenario, but just wanted to voice that.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Warwick, or is it?
Because we're just noting, I can see my questions through away.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
cool?
yeah,
But
that would be
I've just
great.
got, my question is around the word transferring of assets didn't see an option for the CHIP or the housing trust to purchase over time from council, and that's But I'll send the questions through. And the other one is the definition of affordable. I didn't see the definition of affordable,
that's
so
an ongoing
that would be
conversation.
good to have in a document, because what is affordable? I mean, we've got lots of developers developing affordable homes that are $800,000. It's not affordable, you know, so that would be good to clarify, maybe. But I'll send the questions through.
I think, can I just note for clarity, we've used the word transfer. Any transaction between council and the trust effectively is negotiated. So if it is that we're selling something to them and they're purchasing it, that will be what happens. And so it could be on a case-by-case basis. We would also, just as an example, have requirements if we are selling something to them about what we'd expect them to do with anything. We wouldn't expect that to be something that you would put into the trust deed itself. That there's further ongoing transactions that occur as part of the process. So at the moment, the trust, once it's settled, will effectively have $10 to its name and no assets or anything else. So if you think of this as a series of steps, we'll be setting some further criteria around any transaction that we have with them about any opportunity, be it the development of affordable housing, or would, if we considered that they would potentially be a contender around our older person's housing. So we'd have requirements set around all of those things.
Cool. All right, one last question and then we'll go to right of introduction.
Yeah,
Mayor Marlborough.
sorry, I just kind of spotted it. So we've already approved this trust deed in principle. And then C says that the changes aren't substantive enough to require us to approve it. But we haven't actually, when are we going to actually approve it?
So
as opposed to approve in principle?
The council approved in principle the draft that had been set for engagement with trustees, and it was agreed in the original recommendations that if the trustees proposed any legally, I'll say non-significant changes, which we're listing, that there was an ability for you as mayor and Darren as our chief executive to sign the final settlement of the trust deed, because the in principle version has basically been accepted between the two parties.
Okay, so
Yeah.
in other words, the trust deed doesn't have to be approved by council. It's enough to approve it in principle.
Correct.
Great. Okay.
Great, thank you. Right of introduction, Councillor Wilson.
And you become tweaker in chief. Yeah, just that. Yeah, they're starting with $10 to the name and no assets and no funds. I've been in that position myself. Yeah. The to that point, actually, that is the primary asset of any trust. So for this trust, it's just an embarrassment of riches. We have been really, really fortunate. I just wanted to say the process for the establishment of this has just been superb. It's been the best possible process. So congratulations to you for doing that. And I think that's why we've got the outcome that we've got, because that process, bad process, usually bad outcome. I will say again, I think this is the most important thing we will do this triennium. I think this is absolutely huge. It's huge for Kapiti. It locks in a whole bunch of other stuff that comes with housing. Gives a whole bunch of certainty to industry, gives a whole bunch of certainty to people who are in our houses at the moment. So I would just congratulate everybody who's been involved in this. And Stephen, you guys have done an enormous amount of work on this over a long period of time. We've had a lot of it that's come through Martin's committee, and the feedback has just been really positive all the way through. And a consequence of this and the process is that, with no disrespect to everybody in the audience, nobody's turned up today to give us a hard time about it, right? So it's fantastic. Thoroughly endorse this all the way through.
And now to Bede.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So lest anybody take the view that I'm just a negative Nelly, I just want to endorse Councillor Wilson's comments around the strength of the process here, but want to add also, I think the heart has been strong through it, and I really appreciate that from a human perspective, because ultimately this benefits real people in their real lives. And I think, you know, two very good people leading the process has been really beneficial to capture that heart. So thank you.
Could not agree more, and what a great note to end debate on. Thank you, Bede. Moved and seconded. All those in favour of these 5 recommendations? Aye. Against? Carried. Great. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks, Darren. All right. So we've got 15 minutes to get through. Nah, not really. We'll take our time if we need to. Just to note, though, that we do have an external coming in at 1 o'clock for the members' briefing. So if we can try and stick to some measure of time, that would be good. All right, we've got now item 9.3. Jason, welcome to the table. And yeah, Chris, I don't know if you were going to make some introductory comments and then pass over. But I feel like we have already discussed this in a whole bunch of different forms so far in this hui. So if we can probably predominantly take the paper as read, that would be useful.
Thank you. I think I'm just going to set the context to say this paper is focused on unpacking the CAP report recommendations. It follows on from a request from you for us to come back to you. We have proposed, given the feedback that we've had from various parties, that there's no value in undertaking further work around the report itself. So we're not looking to propose to engage with others, to focus on the Jacobs report or any of that. We've put the report over there. We've also said to you around a recommendation around integrating coastal adaptation work with Greater Wellington Regional Council that it's not the right time. We're putting that to the side. That's our proposal to you. The paper refers you to a table. It's table 9. Table 1 under paragraph 9. We've basically unpacked the CAP's recommendations and noted that some are non-statutory and one was statutory related. We've, in that table, indicated whether something we thought was a top, medium or low priority. That was just to give an indication of time for which we might consider progressing steps if you thought they were valuable. We're actually not seeking your agreement to immediately take action today. What we are asking you to do is to agree that you want us to come back to you in April to tell you what it would take to undertake more work. Some of the items in this table I will point out, just for clarity, link to Dr. DeLonghi's report around signal issues, signals, triggers and thresholds. That's actually about some practical steps to be taken. It doesn't actually relate specifically to the Jacobs report. So I just want to be clear about what it is we're asking you to do and what we're asking you not to do through this mechanism. So we are planning, if you agree to the recommendations today, to look at what it would take to do this work, to come back to you, to go, this would be the budget, this would be the time frame for it, this is what you'd get. You'd need to prioritise what you want us to do. This paper does not focus on the district plan coastal chapter or the review of our coastal plan change. That's a separate matter, and we will be coming back to you early in the new year to seek your agreement to our next steps on that. It does have a recommendation around statutory coastal planning, and that was just to do with a recommendation around taking a risk-based approach. And that's similar to what other districts have done. That was in the CAP report, and that's the only part that relates to that at all. So in our mind, this is a really simple paper that's looking at the recommendations you received, has unpacked them slightly to categorise them, and has proposed the ones that we think would be of value to investigate more, to come back to you with a bigger or wider work program. The last bit I want to draw your attention to is recommendation E of the paper. We would like your agreement that we can now start to continue our work on the climate change strategy. And we're proposing that we're going to break that strategy up into 3 different parts. One on mitigation, which we've already done work on and can just land it. You've set an emissions reduction target, so it's just really wrapping around that. The second part of it is around resilience and recovery. You know that we have the Risk and Assurance Committee already sitting across our recovery work program. So it's just acknowledging that that is going to progress. And the third arm around adaptation, that can't actually proceed until the work noted in recommendation A is investigated, you prioritise it and determine what we're going to do, and it proceeds. So that's going to be a longer term. I don't know the time frame because it depends on the decisions you make in April next year, but effectively it's the longer term piece around adaptation. So you're not actually agreeing today to actually implement anything. You're agreeing, if you agree with our recommendations, that we investigate some more, explore some options and come back to you. So that's what you've been asked to do today. And I'll pass over to Jace to see if he's got anything he wants to add to that. No, he's shaking his head.
Cool.
We'll take the paper as read.
We do have a couple of extra recommendations that I believe have been proposed, so if we could bring up those on the screen, Katie, that would be great. Councillor Cooper. And also I think the Mayor proposed one that was similar to H, and so Councillor Cooper also put forward the same thing, so those two have been combined, and then G was a separate recommendation posed by Councillor Cooper. So just to keep those in mind when you're also asking your questions and debating as well, so that you have full warning as to what we're likely to be voting on, provided these are moved in one bulk. Okay, Councillor Cooper.
Hi, thanks, Jason and Chris. I've got a number of questions. My first one, 4.1, page 111. Council established Takatai Kapiti project to meet arising Environment Court mediation in response to litigation on coastal hazard provisions. We've heard that adaptation report from Jacobs, which drove the work for CAPS, isn't a statutory requirement. So did Takatai Kapiti actually meet the statutory requirements for coastal planning, coastal hazard provisions?
Kia ora koutou. I'm Jason Holland, I'm the District Planning Manager. So just to go back to 4.1 and starting with the reference to commitments arising from Environment Court mediation, one of those commitments was to look at a range of coastal adaptation options. That really was the genesis of the Takatai Kapiti project, and it looked at adaptation options, and it also had a scope which Council determined for it in December 2020 to provide some guidance to Council on what a coastal hazard plan change, the approach that it might take. And so that was the genesis of Takatai Kapiti. That is why the panel's report covered the matters that it did. It really does go back to the Environment Court mediation and a Council decision which was critical in December 2020. When it comes to the Jacobs report or any evidence that any party may choose to bring to that coastal hazard plan change process, ultimately it will be up to the hearings panel to determine the degree to which it considers that any of that evidence meets the various tests, including the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. That is how RMA plan changes work. Of course, the step before that is that Council will initially be asked to publicly notify a plan change, and it will need to be satisfied at that time that the plan change is suitably robust. One of the ways that it will do that is it will look at a Section 32 evaluation, and that will include the justification for the plan change. So it absolutely is vital that council does do a plan change that's based on robust science that does meet New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. When it comes to the Jacobs report or any other evidence, that will all become tested in the hearings process.
Great. Just a question in terms of preparing this report. We've now got the Dr. DeLonghi report. Was that used in the preparation of this report or in the preparation of setting the adaptation or the direction of this report? So my question is, is council staff actually using the report, or is it not using the report to drive the direction of planning?
I might answer that just to say, in my opening, I noted that this is a report back that related to a previous council meeting and a recommendation that asked us to come back. That's what we're doing. Alongside that, obviously, we've received the DeLonghi report, and I think Jason's reference to district planning and the fact that as we initiate that process and look at all relevant evidence, that's when that would come into play. So we weren't intending to talk about that report in the session today. It's not that we're ignoring it. We were just trying to respond to a resolution, essentially, to close the loop on that.
Okay, so just follow-up question to that. So 6.1.10, where it says prepare a coastal district plan change using risk-based approach, on it goes, using relevant national guidance, best available information. So if I'm saying the Waikato report is the best available information, are you saying the independent commissioner makes that assessment so you guys won't use it? Or are you going to... How does that work?
Yeah, no, happy to speak to it. So I can assure you that all the way along this process and going forward, we've been quite consistent that if a party has information that they would like to bring to the table, we've got very much an open mind to it, and it goes on the table. I think the DeLonghi report is a really useful addition to the conversation that crew have invested in, and we welcome it. I think, while it's not the conversation for today, in my view, we now need to look at that report and the Jacobs report, and as I heard Mr. Rush say, I thought very helpfully, look at where there are aspects in common and looking to narrow down where there are differences. I think that would be a really useful next step to take, and I'm interested in exploring a process where that might occur before notification, because the traditional approach to these things is that that would happen after notification, after submissions, perhaps in a pre-hearing kind of way. And I'm curious about whether council can do better than that and start to explore that before notification.
Great, thank you. In terms of adaptation, so 6.1.6, develop implementation plans prior to trigger points being activated. So would that be before, are we going to develop those trigger points before or after monitoring has taken place? So I think both reports say we need to monitor, which is a really good thing to do, the more monitoring we do. So how can we develop implementation action plans before we do that analysis? Or are we relying on those implementation plans on the reports that we have? So I guess my question is, do we develop those in 5, 6, 10 years' time, or are we actually going to develop them now based on modelling?
Yeah, you're honing in on why sequencing of this future work program is so vital, and that is what we're looking to come back to you with more advice on in April.
And one of the issues I think we've got is we've got Jacobs that has, CAPS that has 20 risk units, and we've got a report from the Waikato reports going, perhaps that's not 20, that might be 5 or 6 or 4 or 5. And that very much dictates the cost, the time, resources in developing plans and engaging with communities. So that's actually a critical aspect of the plan, isn't it? Of our plan, your plan.
Sequencing and prioritisation.
Yep.
Absolutely. Look, there's a lot in these recommendations, and I really don't think council can do it all at the same time.
Thanks for your questions, Councillor Cooper. Do you have any more, or can we go?
I'll come back once. I'll come back later if I need
Okay.
to. But thank you. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Councillor Coe.
Thank you. Jason, I've always held you in very high regard, and I still do. And I, don't let it go to your head. But you've always given us very sound, solid advice. And I'm thinking, if I was you, listening to the public speakers this morning, I would have been itching to say something in response. And I would just like, if you wish, to give you an opportunity to respond to some of the points that were raised in public speaking this morning. You don't have to take up that opportunity if you don't wish to, but I would just like to give you the opportunity to do that. Thank you. Putting you on the spot.
Thank you. Well,
That's not your job to say that, Councillor Coe.
yes, it is. Thank you.
Sorry, if we could just keep the meeting in order, thank you.
You don't have to take up that opportunity if you don't wish to, but I would like to hear from you your thoughts on some of what was raised this morning, if you wish. Where do you start, I guess?
look, I should really start by thanking those who came along and have invested hours of their day, let alone the hours that they've invested to think about what they were going to say today, not including all of the hours that they've spent previously providing us with communications, asking us questions, giving us a chance to share information with them. I mean, it's a massive investment that people have chosen to make in a council process, and I want to acknowledge that. I think our mission going forward is to try to communicate as clearly as we can about what it is we are, I guess, in our advice to elected members, what are we actually asking them to make? I feel as though with this particular paper, Chris has already summarised it, this is really a paper that is going, there is a heck of a lot in the Takatai Kapiti panel's recommendations. It's going to take more than one session to unpack it all. There's a reason why this paper is not seeking council decisions on whether or not to implement recommendations. This needs more work and more time. If we look at the history of how this whole topic has got to where it's got to in this district, there have been periods of time, I think, where in the past things have actually moved a bit too quickly and council has lost its community along the way. And I'm thinking actually going back to 2012 with the notification of a plan change where there was no draft that was issued before that. I just think it's really, really critical that we take a little bit of time at critical junctures like this just to make sure that you get all the advice you need and you're aware of all of the implications of different options. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just to let the table know, we are at 12:30, and let's continue with the questioning, and yeah, it's useful. But again, please just keep in mind the time. Councillor Wilson.
I don't have a question. I'm quite happy to make a statement at some stage.
Okay, well, Councillor Cooper, did you want to move these recommendations, including your?
Are we meeting in January? Is council coming back in January? Are we?
The end of Jan, the very end of Jan. So So yeah, just to bring us back to what's on the screen then, Councillor Cooper, are you happy to move all of the recommendations, including the 2 additional ones? Okay, just G and H. So we'll. All right.
I'm
Well,
happy
maybe
to second G and H.
we'll debate those, and then hopefully we'll just move the others in a bulk then separately. Okay. So G and H, seconded by Councillor Wilson.
Can I ask a question in relation to this?
Yep. So we've got an indication that those will be moved and seconded. So yeah, we'll go back to question, and then question time will come back to you, Councillor Cooper, for your right of introduction. We'll just move. Oh no, you've got a. So, Councillor Wilson, if yours isn't a question, can you put your mic off, please?
Oh, sorry.
The Larissy. Oh, no. Okay. Deputy Mayor Kirby, sorry, your light just went off and I don't know why.
So just for clarity, are we still asking questions about the report before we?
Yep, questions about
Okay.
questions about the report at any time.
So just a question, it's probably a really simple answer. Have we had a response to the letters to the Insurance Council and Department of Conservation?
No, we haven't yet.
Okay, so we're almost 6 weeks past and they still haven't responded.
Maybe a follow-up is required.
Okay. Have we had any sort of acknowledgement of those letters?
I'm not personally aware of any acknowledgement. The chief
No
is
acknowledgement either.
shaking his head, so no.
Okay.
No,
thanks
we've
for the
had nothing, but fair to say, government has a lot in front of them, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, Insurance Council isn't government.
No, but I'm sure Chris Farfoy is also very busy dealing with things.
Hmm.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bede, Larissy, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, again. This question might have been answered, but I think the sort of maybe context sort of slightly changes it. So on that table on page 113, under non-statutory coastal adaptation planning, on the third point it says prepare a Kapiti coastal adaptation plan. Says top priority progress from 2025 to 26. So I guess question for you, Jason, aka Zoolander. In terms of the timing of that adaptation plan, are we really prioritising that, or is that a broader conversation? Is it, because what I took from this morning's conversations is that the urgency really is in the coastal adaptation, coastal plan change. And really, within that coastal plan change is where a lot of the heated conversations are probably going to happen. Will this adaptation conversation not be clearer once that plan change is done, bearing in mind the effects that we need to adapt to aren't happening probably till at least 2050? I'd love to be part of that conversation, and I'm keen to have it now while I'm still an elected member, but that may not be the wise thing to do. Right? What thoughts on that? Open question, I guess.
I'm just going to start and then hand over to Jace. I think in the context of adaptation in this conversation, I think we need to be clear that we're already doing things now. So we already do sand dune planting. We already have seawalls and a maintenance program for that. And I think if different parts of our district experience different challenges, for those people where there are seawalls and that is offering a good protection, and I will note that Dr. DeLang noted in his presentation that those seawalls play a really important role in ensuring erosion is reduced for our district. We need to be clear about what we're doing in the short, medium and long term, and at the moment, was the life of some of the things like the seawalls to end, the useful life of it, it's not clear what we would be doing. And so more thought, effort and energy needs to go into thinking about what we do now to ensure, if that's the desire of the community, that we maintain those current protections. So some of what we're doing is quite practical in here. And based off what we do now, some of it, which is I think people have got quite a focus out 50 to 100 years, I know there's uncertainty out there, and that's that we don't have a crystal ball to tell you what will happen, but we can tell you about what we're doing now. So some of it will be quite practical. Do you want to add to that, Jace?
Yeah, look, I think the approach in Table 1 is intended to be a bit of a starter for 10. I would anticipate that the advice in April will look at proposing sequencing and timing, and it could suggest options. The key thing for us to make sure you're aware of is what are the implications of different options, and some of those implications actually feed across into implications for other work, like the climate change strategy. So I think what you might be suggesting to us is that we take a bit of a look at the timing of that one and perhaps flesh out what are the pros and cons of that versus a different option that might be a bit slower for that one to allow other work to occur. Is that reasonable?
I think so. I think that probably makes sense. Bear in mind, I am answering off the cuff. But so, am I right in that the previous hold that was put in place maybe had some consequences of other pieces of work that's now just sort of able to be untangled and that continue while this main piece gets figured out down the track? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. No, thank you.
Thanks, Bede. Good questions. Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm trying to pull together some of the answers that were made in the public session this morning versus some of the information in this paper, as well as particularly G that we've got up there. So as I asked earlier on, the last item in the table talks about preparing a coastal district plan change. I just want clarification that that is actually a non-statutory requirement.
No, I would consider that a coastal hazard plan change is a statutory requirement.
So you added the word hazard in there. There has been, that is part of the issue that has not actually been done, that risk assessment in terms of hazards.
Look, there's an opinion that I recognise and respect.
Okay, then so what we have written in this table versus what is the difference between that and what's actually in G on the table there on the board?
If I might note, in the table, we've just indicated a broad timeframe, 25-26, because as we said to you, we're coming back to you with further advice. The coastal plan change is not the focus of this paper. We have separate work underway. This just merely notes that we are planning to come back in January and take decision around commencing the coastal plan change, which is work we're doing anyway, and you're just requesting we prioritise that and note that we're coming in January to seek that approval.
Okay, I'll just leave that there then. So one of the other steps is to canvass the community to determine the signals, risks and thresholds. It's my understanding that you can't actually do that without having done that risk assessment first. Is that a fair?
Well, moving past whether or not the risk assessment has been completed.
Well, actually, if I can just add, so in terms of, I think it was policy 24 that was talked about, we have a DeLonghi report, which has not been even mentioned in this paper. Would actually that satisfy that risk assessment, and is there an undertaking by this by staff that they would actually be using that report?
That report certainly is on the table for consideration. I think I'll leave it at that.
That is different from using, if I may say so.
Drawing on all information is something that we've committed to for quite some time.
I might just note that part of our process to come back next year, having undertaken some analysis and investigation, including timeline, budgets and approach, is that we're tabling that with you next year. So we don't have all the detail set out of what we're planning to do. We were taking step one of going, these are the recommendations, here's what we think they practically in an operational sense mean, and if you see these and are in agreement, we would do some more analysis and investigation, put it back on the table for you to go yes, no, maybe in April or by April.
Okay, so then just my last question is that in terms of coming back in January, that would occur before any of these steps listed in this table 1 would be implemented?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to chip in, Councillor, off the back of your questions about the report that was commissioned. You might have heard when the petition was presented to Council, the offer of thanks to Council officers for providing advice that really assisted that report being commissioned. So that would lead me to believe that we are open and transparent in what we are doing, and that we simply won't ignore that report. But what we have in front of us today is getting us to a next step. So the report is only freshly received, right? It would be very unfair to expect that council officers would have interrogated the report and would now be committing to fully use that report. Of course, we will consider it. That's only fair and reasonable, and that's what we are doing here. So I would just draw your attention to what you are being asked to consider this morning, because it's really important. The next steps, touching on Jason's comments that he has said really, really well, so gracefully and with profession, is that we will be moving through this next year. Plan change is not something that is lightly done. You've just seen that with PC2. So I would ask you to be considered about what you are discussing here now this afternoon, no longer this morning. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Halliday. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pravanov, we do need to keep moving along. Sorry, yeah, Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, I'll be quick, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question, and I think it's been answered with regards to 2 recommendations that have been put up there. And what I've just generally heard is that council officers are comfortable coming back in January with that time frame. Is that correct? Yep. Okay. So that was me. That's that question. Next one is just correct me if I'm wrong. Just following on the CEO's words here in general conversation I'm hearing is what we're creating here. Like I said, moving forward is a framework to move forward within, so that all these things can be addressed with regards to the conversations. It's not excluding anything, it's just putting a framework around how we're going to move forward.
Yes.
Thank you. If I could just come back to page 113, interestingly enough, it's just something that was referred to, I think, by Councillor Cooper, which was the bottom non-statutory cost-related actions. There's just a comment there that I just wanted to tease out a little bit. It says, prioritising Council's work programme, options for investing in new land areas for development that are away from coastal hazard areas. I think it's a term that's pretty much all open for a bit of interpretation there. Are we talking council spending dollars buying land for that, or are we talking land designation through a plan change with regards to opening up other land that's perhaps more in, should we say, outside the risk areas, if you like? How am I reading that? Am I reading that?
I think that's why we need to come up with those options for your consideration. That's the suggestion there, and I think you've highlighted some.
Yep. So this ought
There
to
may
be
be
discussed.
others.
Ought to be discussed. Oh, lovely. Thank you very much. That's me. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Halliday. Councillor Cooper.
No, I'm fine, thank
Okay, Councillor Pravanov.
Yes, I just wanted to make the comment following on.
Oh, sorry, if it's a comment, could we just make sure that this is properly moved and seconded and the right of introduction is had? If there's anything, Councillor Cooper, you wanted to say? Or no? Yeah.
Yeah, after. You ready for it?
Yeah, go for it now, because Councillor Pravanov's got some debate.
So I added G in because I think it's really important that we focus on, one, a statutory obligation. We said we were going to do this many, many years ago, and it's vitally important that, one, we fulfil our promises, which I know we're going to do, but it actually needs to take priority in the scheduling. And I think Jason hit the nail on the head, as did Chris, in saying that scheduling is vitally important, because the coastal plan change, by its statutory requirement, assesses risk. So unless we've actually assessed our risk, then how are we going to adapt and put adaptation in place? So, and I concur with Chris saying we're doing adaptation all the time. Hopefully we're draining the Waikanai River, taking the shingle out to lower it. We're doing planting programs. We're working in our drains and our waterways. That's adaptation. So we're actually doing this as part of our core business. But in terms of our coastal adaptation plan, we've got the CAPS report that is based on the CAPS recommendations based on the Jacobs report that has arguably implausible, unlikely, higher end predictions. We've got the new Dr. DeLonghi report that seems to be a lot more fair-minded and reasonable. But that can only come together if we've actually got a plan change that assesses the risk and gives us some direction. So for me, it's vitally important that that's actually done first and we don't race into resources and planning that perhaps we don't need to do. And so I would like that my intent of this was a signal to staff, and I hope it's supported by other members, that this actually needs to be a laser-focused priority for us to get over the line. And I think Crew would support that. I think the community will support that. And then we can be laser-focused on moving forward with, good monitoring, good understanding of the environment, and good adaptation into the future, which, let's face it, will be continuing over the next 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years and on. So I hope people support it, and I take the staff's commitment that they will be focusing on it and coming back to us in the early new year and progressing it at haste.
Great, good comments. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Pravanov.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to follow up on what the CE's comments were around the Dr. DeLonghi report. I certainly acknowledge the input that KCDC staff did into this, and I suppose that makes it even more surprising that it wasn't actually included in this report, even just as a reference. So I'll leave it at that. So I suppose in relation to E, I'm actually really pleased to see that the climate change and resilience strategy will be proceeding.
Sorry, Councillor Pravanov, we're just debating G and H
at
the moment.
Okay, yep, okay.
So, raise that in the next
Yep,
set of
okay.
debate. Thank
Yep.
you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just in terms of seconding that, I agree. It was said earlier that sequencing is vital. I think the sequencing here is vital, and I think the risk assessment first, followed by adaptation. Not that they aren't all happening anyway. It's just in terms of the structure. To Darren's point about I completely understand why DeLonghi isn't woven into policy. It's only just recently been received. There's quite a bit of before you determine to weave anything into policy, you've got to unpick it all first, and there's quite a job to do that, right? So, but to Sean Rush's point about the commonalities, I think there are sufficient commonalities in the two reports to be able to say, okay, this is the area that we can move forward in, and so so just to endorse becoming my favourite word today, that sequencing, I'll both note and endorse. I'll endorse my noting of G and H just in terms of that sequencing, and I don't think by endorsing that, I don't think it throws anything out. I think it just smooths the process even more.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Two last contributions, Mayor Holbrook.
Yeah, and this will wrap up my other one as well. I'm going to vote for this, but I'm also going to vote for the rest because I don't see them as mutually exclusive. What we're clearly signalling to staff is that the planning side is really important to us, but we've also got to work out what we're going to do in the longer term, potentially, or the shorter term. That decision's yet to be made.
Yeah. With
some of the information that's been thrown up through the work that we've spent a long time doing. So this is early stages. we'll come back next year and we'll be able to talk about how to progress the plan change, what to do in the light of our investigations into the report. The DeLonghi report will also feed into that, all the information that we have. So, yeah, it's not clear what it's going to look like at the moment, but I proposed H so that it was transparent today that we do intend to do that, to do that plan change at, at pace. Coming back, first meeting next year, I believe.
Yep,
Potentially.
Yep, that's the case. Bede Larissy.
Thank you. You don't want to say much, but just want to really, really affirm, support, endorse, whatever you want to say, Councillor Cooper's comments. I totally agree that process, doing that plan change first, absolutely deals with a whole lot of issues that won't have to be dealt with in that next process, and we can have a good, sensible conversation about the what next. Obviously, I've been, whether I've liked it or not, I've been deep in this conversation over the last couple of years, and it's been pretty rewarding. We've done it together, members of the public and elected members, so it's really good to see. I think it feels to me, having been through some of the conflict in this area and all kinds of other areas, feels like we're at a point where we're actually able to make a wise decision. And I think it's always quite satisfying when you can say, yeah, this decision is a wise one. So I totally endorse this decision. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Right of reply, is there anything, Councillor Cooper, you wanted to say?
Yeah, just quickly, just in terms of the risk assessment has been done. It's been done, it's called, we call it the Waikato report or the Dr. DeLonghi report. So that piece of work has actually already been done. And I do concur with Darren's, the CE's musings that the staff have been supportive of that process and supplied information and fed into it. So in a sense, I would say that it's as much a council report as much as an independent report, because we have fed that information into it, which is quite nice. I came to council to make common sense decision making and practical decision making for the community, and I think if we can get the Schedule 1 coastal plan done as quick and as effectively as possible, I think that will be a good common sense practical win for the community. So I hope this this motion amendment passes and gets us on the path of getting it done. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Cooper. So G and H have been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. So now we go back to recommendations A through F. Is there someone who would like to move those recommendations? I feel like most of the questions have kind of been, yeah, Councillor Halliday. I'm happy to second that from the chair. Right of introduction.
I think just about everything's been covered. This has been a very, very thorough conversation. I do take on board with regards to what Councillor Cooper's saying. Proceed with haste, but there has to be a certain element of caution with that, because as reference was made to PC2, there has to be thoroughness as well. And this is also a very legislative process, so there has to be some realistic expectations on those timeframes as well with regards to how long this will take. I was very surprised as a new councillor how long PC2 took and all the hoops and everything involved in that, but do take on board very strongly with regards to this as an issue which has been going on since 2012 that has to be addressed, and looking forward to it being addressed, and I'm sure there will be very in-depth scrutiny through all that process as it currently has been.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'm just going to address the substantial parts. As you know, I'm normally laser focused, so I was just talking about G and H before. One of the things that, upon first reading, some people might think that B is seen as an endorsement of CAP, and it's not explicitly that at all, in my view. So what this whole paper does, I think it continues the discussion, and it allows for that new material that's come in that's come in from Mr. DeLonghi, that's come in from Dr. Padamsey. If it's not Dr. Padamsey, it should be PhD in coastal management. We are continuing to get expert opinion, and as you know, it's a moving feast. When you have to give effect to regional policy statements and national policy statements, and they get varied, and then that variation has to be played into it. And so this stuff is complex. I think the section 24 that's addressed in DeLonghi and perhaps not in Jacobs is a factor. So all of these discussions, and now that we've got G&H up there, I think there's a really good opportunity to weave a whole bunch of stuff, and that the public are full part of the process. So I'm comfortable with that.
Awesome, thanks, Councillor Wilson. Kim Tahiwi.
Kia ora. So I will be supporting all the motions now that I've figured out I'm not in the council meeting and I'm in Strattonot. Apologies. I did want to directly address a comment that was made during public speaking. My intention is not to discredit anyone, or it's just to have my opinion on what was said. So there was a comment made around Dr. Aroha Spinks, and I feel it was misrepresented that she commented that she didn't read the entire report. Intentionally or unintentionally, what that implies is the process wasn't flawed and she didn't give enough time to it. So Aroha was our Ngāhapo Taki environmental expert, and she was involved in the Northern Adaptation Area, which is the Ngāti Raukaua here. So that's just south of Te Horo. And past that, then we go into Te Atiawa land, and so what we normally do is defer to them because that's their rohe, and we tautoko what they say. So I'm confident that Aroha read and critically reviewed all the documentation regarding the Northern Adaptation Area. Unfortunately, excuse me, I did allow you to have your say. I expect the same respect.
Yeah,
to have
hang on,
myself
can we
have to
just,
say.
the meeting is happening at the table between the committee members of Strategy Ops and Finance, so if we can keep that conversation.
Also, what I want to acknowledge is the differences between the coastlines. So from Otaki to Waikanae to Paraparaumu, they have different coastlines. So obviously the impacts of these reports are going to be different. I'm mindful that there's a difference of opinion regarding the material upon which these decisions have been made. I also understand that as people, we tend to support the report that's in line with our own opinions and sometimes our own agendas. From a mana whenua perspective, if faced with protecting our environment and protecting housing values, we're always going to choose the environment no matter what. I think we can all agree that there is evidence of coastal erosion. And if we don't do something about it, it's going to continue. There is a difference in opinion on how imminent that threat is in some areas, but when we are considering that, I would like us to think about that this whenua has allowed us unfettered access to her resources for years and years and years. And it's about time we acknowledged that and cleaned up our own mess. That's all.
Kia ora, Kim, thank you for your comments. Councillor Pravanov, and then we'll go to the vote.
Yes, just very briefly, I just wanted to acknowledge, I suppose, the work that council staff have done in terms of looking at how the climate change and resilience strategy is going to now roll out, and finding a way forward to break it into small parts rather than delaying it until we've done the adaptation component of it. Thank you.
Yes, completely agree. That was something that, yeah, a few conversations have been had about, and some sort of map to zero to be in alignment with our district-wide emissions reduction strategy is something we're really keen to kind of set the political direction for. So I think these recommendations give us the chance to do that. So yeah, thanks for taking that on board. Councillor Halliday.
I'm picking up that right response.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, right of reply. Yeah. No,
Not a question
of
or
course you
anything like
do. Yeah, you don't have
It's going to be very brief.
but-
Just completely endorse all comments just made by Kim over on the other side there. Has been very, very relevant, I think, summarised today very, very nicely. This is a contentious issues with regards to perceptions, and there will be no winners in this conversation. There'll be potentially people that have to compromise, but as long as we are open and transparent, and there will be potentially even mixed views on that with regards to things. The importance of this table being informed with regards to what's going on. is very important, and then being aware of the amount of information that we are made aware of, but also this is an ongoing journey. We've been talking about, well, from my perspective, this one for years, and that's an accumulated information that comes into this equation. And I made reference to CRU with regards to making me more aware of this in the last triennium. That certainly built my knowledge, and even Sean's report, and certainly the report that came from CRU around risk, are all part of the equation that we take on board. But we also do receive information and advice, which we have to weigh that all up with, and that becomes the rub of being in this chair with regards to making the decision processes. Being in this chair, we do have to be respectful, and I do apologise to Tanya with regards to speaking over her, and thank you for pulling that up as such as well. That's reciprocal. Hopefully as well, and I will conduct myself, should we say, more appropriately in the future. We'll endeavour to, because I'm sure Beat will be sitting there to pull me up for that. But that is the importance of this particular situation, is that there is a lot of passion in it, and when we're at this table, that's why we have rules to manage that situation. So it's been a very, very interesting day, and should we say, met expectation with regards to things, and we're on a onward journey. We're not going anywhere, and we have to make a decision at some point, although it's a fair way off. Thank you.
Great, nice. Yeah, nice concluding comments for this corridor for the day, but not forever, obviously. So recommendations A through F have been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Aye. Would you like a division or? No. Okay, but we'll just have that. Yeah. Cool. So that's passed. Those recommendations are carried. Thank you, Jason. Great. Okay, so in terms of where to from here, we are going to, I'm going to propose that I'm going to move, that item 9.4, which is our performance report for the period ending 31 October 24, be referred to the council meeting next week in the interest of time and following consultation with the Mayor, Chief Executive and staff. There is space on the agenda for this to be considered next week, so I'll move that. Seconded, Councillor Coe. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. So we'll move that. And then confirmation of minutes, I think we'll shift those. Also, do I need to do a procedural motion for that? So we'll shift the confirmation of our minutes because we've got PE ones too. Not much point in going through that whole rigmarole. We'll just shift those to early next year and bring them to a soft meeting then. So that takes us through to our closing karakia. Thank you all for your patience as we've gotten through this hui today. I've appreciated the people kind of jumping in to both, I guess, strengthen the level of respect around the table and in terms of a conversation and a dialogue with those who have joined us in the public gallery. I think it's been, as Councillor Halliday said, quite a useful and productive conversation. So, yeah, thanks for your patience as we got through it. So, closing karakia. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga ki runga i a tātou katoa, kia hua ai te makahikihi e ki ana, kia toi te kupu, kia toi te reo, kia toi te wairua, kia tau te mauri, ki roto i a mātou mahi katoa i tēnei rā, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. All right, so we'll get some lunch and maybe even bring it back in here because we've got an external coming in for the briefing that's supposed to be happening right now. So 1:15, okay, 10 minutes.